Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is someone that I've been wanting to interview for so long, and I'm so honored and excited to have him here. His name is Jeffrey Smith, and he is a real leader in this space of informing people about our food supply, what we can do about it, the environment, all the things. It's a really powerful episode. Hope you guys enjoy it, listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it. Now, of course, I want to thank you for being here, and I would love to invite you to visit natnidham.com, which is where you'll learn about the membership community, which is really undergoing some beautiful changes moving into 2025. So I hope you guys can join me. And also that is where you can sign up for the newsletter. And we've got two different newsletters. You can sign up for both. One is the general newsletter where I share biohacks every week, my favorite biohacks every week. And the other one is a peptide specific newsletter. And that's a newsletter where we inform people. We share some fast facts about peptides, and also there's some promotions and stuff in there for people who are interested in that kind of thing. Today, we are lifting the lid on the food industry's best kept secrets with Jeffrey Smith. Ever wonder why gut issues, anxiety, or even insomnia are on the rise? Well, it turns out that GMOs and glyphosate, the chemical found in everything from cereal to wine, might just have something to do with it. Jeffrey Smith is the founder and executive director for the Institute of Responsible Technology, a best-selling author and filmmaker. He reveals the jaw-dropping results of a study where thousands of people saw improvements in 28 conditions after switching to organic foods. Stick around to learn why glyphosate has been called a Darth Vader chemical and why your pantry might just be plotting against you. And of course, what you can do about it. Now, as a global thought leader on the health dangers of genetically modified organisms, also known as GMOs, for over 27 years, this man's been blowing the whistle for a really long time. Jeffrey Smith has authored 2 bestsellers, directed 5 documentaries, delivered 2,000 lectures and interviews in 45 countries, trained 1,500 speakers, and organized more than 10,000 grassroots advocates. Jeffrey has counseled world leaders on 6 continents, and his meticulous research presented at medical conferences has inspired thousands to prescribe non-GMO and organic diets. The success of the GMO education movement he pioneered is measured in part by the 48% of world consumers who acknowledge GMOs are unhealthy. This episode is a must. Enjoy. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome to the show, Jeffrey Smith. It is such a pleasure to have you here tonight.
I am really glad that I'm here to talk to your audience because they're interested in stuff that I can give real data to and actually change lives in a single talk. I mean, we've done it so often, and these are folks that are ready to biohack, to live long, and I actually have some answers.
It's amazing. I love it. And you know, it's funny because in the biohacking / longevity space, we're often talking about, what's the tech I can use? What are the supplements I can take? What do I do? What do I buy? And what we're going to talk about today really kind of is that thing I tell people, okay, just stop. Before you start adding a lot of stuff to the table, what we need to do is make sure that we've taken care of the foundation. And, then they're kind of like, oh yeah, she's going to tell me I need to sleep and manage my stress and eat a good diet and exercise and move and community and gratitude and all the things. Yes. And our topic today takes that to the next level, right? So, I mean, obviously if people are eating everything out of a box or a bag, if you can eat whole foods, you're a step up. But we're now going to we're going to level you up another step here. And
I mean, what I'm going to share is like, we're going to show a little chart in a few minutes where I surveyed 3,256 people, and they switched their diet to avoid GMOs and Roundup, which is now sprayed on the food supply, by switching to organic. And you will see 28 different conditions that improved, most of them significantly, including digestive disorders, 85.2%, fatigue, 60%, overweight and obesity, anxiety and depression, food allergies and sensitivity, and I'm still above 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may seem like, well, can we trust those numbers? I'm going to share numbers that are kind of jaw dropping. And the
Yeah.
purpose of the first half of this, if we end up doing what we talked about, will land the imperative, imperative for health to switch to organic food and to pile whatever other budgets you need in there, your health budget, your philanthropy budget, whatever, because the change is stunning. In a film I did with Amy Hart, and I'll discuss this, there was family with 21 chronic conditions. They switched to organic and they went away. But what was really interesting is the doctors I interviewed who say these are not one-offs. These happen in our practices when we prescribe organic diets. And then to some guy, it's really cool when people cheat, because when they switch, their autoimmune disease symptoms go away, their joint pain goes away, and then they cheat and they come back. That's when we have them. That's when they know the link between what they're feeling and what their challenges are, and GMOs and Roundup in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to share some stunning charts that it's like when I was young, there was a Memorex commercial where the hair was shooting back. Like,
I remember that.
Was it Memorex? And it's like at the end of when I give a lecture and I show these and I go through these 38 charts in 90 seconds, there's like that. And people realize, oh my God, we are being wholesale poisoned. And all of my friends who are now dealing with this disease and this disease and this disease and me, I have now a solution. So let's try it. So I'm going to give the takeaway to start. The takeaway is switch to organic. We'll explain why in a minute, but create a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is along the left side is your fatigue or energy level, your mood, and every one of your symptoms. The next column is 1 through 10. Then every other column, the top one is percentage organic that day, and rate yourself for all those things. Now, you may want to get a baseline today before you've changed your diet, literally today. And then when you switch, you may notice things that you never thought were related to your food, your eczema, your brain fog, did I say brain fog? And you're going to find out why these things are linked, and all of this research that's being hidden and actively covered up, because that's part of my job over 28 years, is to expose the cover up. The subtitle of my book, Seeds of Deception, which launched 21 years ago, was exposing industry and government lies about the safety of the genetically engineered foods you're eating. Lies. I mean, they know. I've talked to people who used to be from Monsanto. They know that it damaged the rats that they fed it to, and they rewrote the study to hide the effects. They know that the milk treated with bovine growth hormone had so much cancer-promoting hormone in the milk, the 3 scientists working for Monsanto stopped drinking milk unless it was organic. One bought his own cow. They pile on and threaten and get fired and censored scientists who discover problems. They spent millions trying to block me, and I'm still talking.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm surprised. We're grateful that you're still talking. Sometimes it's surprising. So, okay, so let's back up a tiny bit. So first of all, the first thing I want to say is there will be visuals to this podcast. So guys, if you're listening to this, and Jeffrey's really good at explaining stuff, so he will, it's not like we're going to throw up slides and go, oh, and look at what you see here.
Oh,
isn't that?
Oh, I wish you could see that. This is life-changing. Next.
So we will explain the slides. However, if you have the time and the capacity for it, definitely check this out on YouTube, because there will be, all the visuals will be there. The second thing is I'd love us to back up a little bit, and just for people who are still new to this space, just to understand this whole idea of GMOs, of Roundup, the glyphosates, like what they are. There's another toxin that you talk about called BT toxin, which is something that's used in organic farming, which, and I know Jeffrey just told us all to eat organic, but he's going to explain, because
Yeah.
it's definitely better than Roundup. It's just not without its own.
I'll tell you all about
At
it.
the end of the day, there's always going to be a trade-off, but I don't even know the full story on BT, so I'm looking forward to hearing this. But let's start with this whole, I learned about Roundup and glyphosate and GMOs when I went back to school, when I studied nutrition. And I went to see a talk by Dr. Stephanie Seneff, which, had my jaw on the floor pretty much the whole time.
And
because
she went to a talk by my friend Don Huber, and her jaw was on the floor because she had figured out, this is worth the tangent here. She's a brilliant senior researcher at MIT, is an expert at analyzing patterns and cause and effect in big data, pulled down everything in the world on autism to try and find the environmental insult, and knew exactly what the physiological changes were for autism, and then brought in all the data on every toxic chemical that she knew about and could not find the cause. Then she went to a lecture by Don Huber, who was an expert at glyphosate, and she said to me, I was on the edge of my seat. Everything he said fit perfectly. She came down, pulled all the data on glyphosate. It was like hand in glove. And we're going to see, and I'll describe for those who don't see it, a autism in 6-year-olds, a line just going straight up, and right along the top, almost 100% correlation, is the amount of glyphosate sprayed on soy and corn in the last 4 years. So now let's introduce GMOs and Roundup and what we're talking about.
And the only other thing I want to say is, guys, this is not all about doom and gloom. There will be solutions.
Oh, totally.
We're going to talk about solutions. There's ways to mitigate. So this is not just about scaring the pants off you. This is about educating, understanding the issue, and then giving you solutions. So
yep.
Just
and we have a related topic on the backside, which is even more dangerous than everything we're talking about. And we'll talk about it then.
Oh, okay. Well, let's start with GMOs. Let's round up.
Okay. Yeah. That's a little teaser or something that's, no, I don't want to, when they run away screaming.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Don't run away. It's okay. There's a solution. There's an answer for everything. So
GMO, genetically modified organism. We're talking about laboratory techniques that either insert foreign genes into DNA of a species, or rearrange, knock out, change, edit the DNA sequence within a species. Originally, the company that brought genetically engineered food was Monsanto. They did it because they had a gangbuster poison called glyphosate, which is a chief poison in the herbicide Roundup. So they had a patent on it that was expiring in the year 2000. Now, glyphosate is an antibiotic, among other things. It kills weeds. It also kills bacteria. But in a chemical waste dump behind a factory, there was bacteria growing in the dump with glyphosate. And they said, great, let's put it in the food supply. So they took the gene out of the bacterium that allowed it to survive in the presence of glyphosate, and they put it into soybeans, corn, cotton, and canola, eventually sugar beets and alfalfa. So now you can spray right over the top of those genetically engineered Roundup ready crops, and they will survive, but all the weeds in the field will die. If you don't have Roundup ready crops, you spray over the top, they all die. So you have to spot spray or spray before. This is like, weeding becomes super easy. Farmers love that option. They can just run their combine, even a plane, over the field, and it gets absorbed into the crop. It goes right into the actual plant, and then it gets distributed to the faster growing portions, which is the food we eat. And 15 or 20% goes into the ground and starts destroying the bacteria in the soil.
So it's an antibiotic, right? So, and they extracted it from bacteria that had evolved to be resistant to it, or they
didn't extract Roundup from the bacteria.
No. The gene that allowed these bacteria to survive, to be resistant to it, they extracted that gene, and then they capitalized on that gene.
Exactly.
And spliced it into the seeds.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
this sounds like a super amazing solution. Yay.
And there's a problem.
But there's a
But
big but here. I know,
right.
giant but.
They also, by the way, genetically engineered corn in the United States and cotton here and soybeans in South America to produce a toxic insecticide
Hmm.
called Bt toxin. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, the problem is that the process of genetic engineering is not precise or safe. It creates massive collateral damage in the DNA. So, one corn that was genetically engineered, a gene that's normally silent, switched on, produces an allergen. Another corn that's genetically engineered has about 200 different proteins and metabolites, including increased, I love these names, putrescine and cadaverine. They're
We
the
know people
compounds
seem
that, yeah, they're real delightful names. They're
they're
responsible
polyamines.
for the foul. They create the odor of rotting dead bodies. They give you
Yeah.
bad breath, but they're also linked to allergies and cancer. So you have all these other problems that are generic from the process of genetic engineering. I in my book Seeds of Deception, I start out with the story of Dr. Arpad Pusztai, the world's leading scientist in his field, who got paid by the UK government to come out with a protocol for testing for the safety of GMOs. He was pro GMO until he discovered that the generic process to create a genetically engineered potato caused within 10 days potentially cancerous digestive tract, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophy of the liver, and damaged immune system, all of which could be created in the human population because it's generic to the process. So now, in addition to the dangers of GMOs, we have the dangers of Roundup, which knocks out, if you're into biohacking and you're into longevity, you probably know some of these expressions. Certainly, Natalie, you are an expert at all of them. But these are the things that glyphosate and even more the Roundup, which has other toxins in it, actually damage. It kills off the beneficial bacteria in our gut.
Mm.
It blocks the ability for the body to absorb minerals. It creates leaky gut. It damages the walls of the intestines. It suppresses digestive enzymes. It destroys mitochondria. It
Mm.
blocks intercellular communication. It messes up hormones. It damages the happy neurotransmitters like serotonin, melatonin, and dopamine. It causes birth defects. It causes problems in the genotoxicity and the genes causing cancer, oxidative stress causing cancer. It's listed as a class 2A carcinogen by the World Health Organization, and I'm just getting started. So
So
all of the
how is it allowed to be out in the world?
well, you see, there's two things.
You
There's
can get it at
science.
Home Depot. Like you can pick it up at Home Depot to use in your garden, or you could. I don't know if you still can. It's
Yeah, 125,000 people were representing had gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and had used Roundup, and many of those people got payoffs because of the trials. But I've been studying captured regulatory agencies.
mhm.
And in the EPA, there's a committee that determines whether toxins cause cancer. And the person who was in charge of the EPA was Monsanto's lapdog. If
Ouch.
you look at the documents made public from lawsuits, you could see that they talked about this guy, Jesse, saying he would try and stop another group from the government from testing glyphosate for cancer. And he said if he could do that, he deserves a medal. There's another document from one of his former colleagues that had to leave the EPA after 30 years saying, please, Jesse, it's definitely a probable human carcinogen. Here's the reasons why. You're not competent to make this decision with your master's degree from 30 years ago. This other person you're working with, she's probably taking money from the industry. Please
Mhm.
finally do. You're used to changing results of EPA evaluations to benefit the applicant. Please don't do that here. He ignored her. He worked for his masters at Monsanto. He only chose industry government, almost exclusively choosing industry studies that were favored by and done by Monsanto. Some were ghost written, and said, we don't see a relationship. But the
Wow.
World Health Organization, which looked at peer reviewed published studies, said, oh, yeah, it's a probable human carcinogen for humans. and definitely a carcinogen for animals. And here's the reason why. And all these juries agree that the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from these particular plaintiffs was related, but that's just one of many cancers, as we're about to see.
Well, it's funny. Funny. It's interesting. There was a woman in one of my communities who um, was dealing, I can't remember if it was a cancer or something else. And she lived on a farm, and like she'd grown up on a farm. She owned, like they owned a farm. And she said to me, it's ironic that we who are living, quote unquote, the healthy outdoor lifestyle,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
are actually the ones suffering from some of the worst cancers because of the widespread spraying that you were just talking about. Unless you're in an area where not only are you not spraying, but your neighbors aren't spraying, because we know that the stuff that gets sprayed doesn't stay necessarily where it gets sprayed. So I would imagine that for these organic farms to really stay organic, they've got to watch where they are and who's around them, kind of thing.
Yeah, and
Uh,
there's going to be
there's
some
spillover.
contamination. There's
But she
contamination.
was saying that all of, like, so many of her neighbors were dealing with the same thing as her, and they were not in they were in they were in conventional agriculture, so they
Right.
were, anyway, she had kind of figured it out. But
You
in
go to
any event,
responsibletechnology.org. We have a database of tests that are done on food for glyphosate levels. So you'll realize, yes, it's on soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa, but those are GMO designed to be sprayed with Roundup. But it's also sprayed just before harvest as a desiccant to dry down or to
we
force ripening. So it's on oats big time, wheat, lentils, mung beans. It's sprayed in the rows of vineyards, so it's in wine, it's in beer, it's on the ground in orchards, gets into the roots. It's in orange juice, and you can see on our database which levels. And you'll find in almost every case the organic is either no detectable level or much less.
mm,
Why would there be any? Well, there's the drift that you just mentioned, but you see, there's so much in the air. The
yeah.
U.S. Geological Survey found glyphosate in 60 to 100% of the samples of the rainwater and in the air, in the groundwater, and 75% in Mississippi, for example. So we have a situation where it's pervasive. 300 million gallons a year are sprayed in the United States, and we want to minimize exposure. We will not be able to eliminate exposure. Now, I would like to say that we don't, in some of the tests on animal studies, we don't know if it's the GMO that's causing the problem or the glyph or the Roundup. So Dr. Seralini took a bunch of rats and fed them for 2 years with Roundup ready corn that had been sprayed with Roundup. They had multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. There was another group that ate just the corn that was never sprayed. They had multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. You'd say, aha, it's the corn. But the group that ate the Roundup in their water and had regular corn, they had multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. And the control group that had natural corn and no glyphosate did not. So, in other words, what I just said, I will make it simple. Roundup and GMOs, individually or together, were causing this multiple
Oh, I
massive
see.
tumors.
They ate the genetically modified corn that hadn't been sprayed with the Roundup, and that also gave them tumors. It's only the corn that hadn't been GMO, genetically modified to be Roundup ready, which means it can be sprayed to kingdom come with Roundup. So it was corn that was not GMO'd and that had not been sprayed. That did not give them cancer. That's the
Right.
only group that had
Well,
cancer.
tumors. We'll call them tumors because it
Or
wasn't an
tumors.
official cancer study, but certainly there was cancer.
They
So
didn't get lumped.
yeah, the tumors were as much as 25% of the body weight of these rats, and they had
Wow.
to euthanize the rats because at that point they considered it, you know, uh, I don't know, inhuman. Anyway, let's. I'm going to take you on a journey here. There's a lot of information pointing to why GMOs and Roundup are causing a bunch of diseases. One is the epidemiological evidence, which we're going to look at some charts, the rise of the disease and the rise of the use of
Mm.
glyphosate on soy and corn, or the amount of soy and corn that's genetically engineered. And the correlation is stunning. Correlation alone does not prove causation. But we have people who have shifted their diets and are getting better. We have doctors using clinical evidence showing that these things are related. We have animal feeding studies showing that when animals are fed GMOs or Roundup or glyphosate, just the glyphosate alone, they get these diseases or the precursors. We even have modes of action, which makes our case very strong, where we can say, what is it about the GMO or the Roundup that is linked to this disease? So in the trials that I was watching for the glyphosate and cancer, there was oxidative stress, there was genotoxicity, there was animal feeding studies, there was human epidemiological evidence. Since then, there was more studies linking. So there's a lot of evidence coming together. I'm going to fly through some studies that I'm going to share now on the screen for those that can see it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to describe it for everyone. We're looking now at a disease chart called inflammatory bowel disease. And you'll see these vertical brown lines show there's a rise in inflammatory bowel disease, which kind of takes off 1999, 2000. And there's an orange single line that represents the amount of glyphosate sprayed on soy and corn in the United States. Those are the two major Roundup Ready crops. And it tells you basically the percentage of soy and corn that are genetically engineered. And there's a very tight correlation. If it were a perfect correlation, it would be 1. This is 0.9378. So inflammatory bowel disease, there's many reasons. I wrote a peer-reviewed published article linking GMOs, Roundup, and Bt toxin to digestive disorders. I'm not going to go into the causation here because we're going to fly through these. I just want to show one other slide before we fly through them. This is deaths from obesity. This is a little different. It has the lines, the vertical lines showing the amount of deaths from obesity. Again, taking off, in this case, starting from, maybe 1990. But there's a trend line, that bottom red line for those who are watching, showing if nothing had changed after 1993, that's where it would have been, really low. But something new came in. And then there's two other lines. One is the amount of glyphosate applied to soy and corn, and one is the percentage of GMO soy and corn, which rise very closely in the slope to the
There's
death.
like a vertical spike in, what is it, 1985, like before 1987, like that purple line goes, it's virtually vertical. It's where everything starts to go north.
Right. That's 19. See, that spike is where the percentage of GMO soy and corn, it was planted in 1996 for the first time, right? Then all these disease lines take off.
Yeah.
All right. So let us now fly. I'm just going to name the disease.
Okay.
So for those that are not watching, these are all diseases that have a very tight correlation, and you could see it with the amount of glyphosate sprayed on soy and corn or the amount of soy and corn. Anxiety, diabetes, deaths from Alzheimer's, deaths from Parkinson's, deaths from hypertension, autism in 6-year-olds, the tightest correlation. Nearly
that is
perfect.
it's almost like,
it's a slide on the top of it. It's like 0.9972 correlation coefficient. Insomnia. I'm going to stop here and give you an example because this is the easiest to explain in terms of modes of action. When you spray the crops, the reason why the crops then we spray it with glyphosate is it blocks the shikimate pathway. And they say, oh, that's the reason why the crops die. It's more complicated, but they say humans don't have the shikimate pathway, so we're safe. We can drink Roundup. But it's not true. The gut bacteria in our bodies use the shikimate pathway. And what do they use it for? To produce a whole medicine cabinet of things, including the precursors to serotonin. It's L-tryptophan. It produces serotonin. Most of it's produced in our gut. The serotonin gets converted to melatonin. The melatonin governs our sleep. When you're taking food with glyphosate, non-organic food, you can block the shikimate pathway in our gut, reduce the amount of L-tryptophan produced, reduce the amount of serotonin produced, reduce the amount of melatonin produced. And here you have insomnia rising dramatically with the increased amount of glyphosate in our food supply. And we can see the causal. So let's continue. Celiac disease, acute kidney injury, death from kidney failure, pelvic and kidney cancer, liver cancer, liver and bile duct cancer, thyroid cancer, deaths from leukemia, breast cancer, deaths from intestinal infection, deaths from disorders of lipoprotein metabolism, peritonitis, hepatitis C, dementia, deaths from senile dementia, diagnosis of ADHD, schizophrenia, suicide by overdose, congenital birth defects, congenital heart defects, newborn metabolic disorders, newborn genitourinary disorders, skin disorders, newborns with lung conditions, newborn eye disorders, newborn blood disorders related to the immune system, anemia, lymph disorders, deaths due to stroke. And then on this figure, we have 28 diseases from the top to the bottom, from digestive. And these are the things, the self-score people described out of the 3,256 people, including some of them were doctors talking about their whole patient load. What got better when they switched to non-GMO and largely organic foods? Digestive, fatigue, overweight, brain fog, anxiety, depression, food allergies, memory and concentration, joint pain, seasonal allergies, gluten sensitivity, insomnia. Insomnia is 33%. Skin conditions other than eczema, hormonal problems, musculoskeletal pain, autoimmune disease, eczema, blood pressure, asthma, menstrual problems, diabetes, mental disorders besides anxiety and depression, underweight, cancer, kidney, infertility, autism, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, those lines start to get smaller at the bottom because
Right.
they're more complex, right? Like the food's a contributor, but it's obviously not. But the digestive disorders is massive. Like it's over 80% shift.
And
in
when you look at something like infertility, it's like 3.8% of the people said that they got better with infertility. First of all, the vast majority of people are not suffering from fertility issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of
well,
a
it's
random
growing
survey.
but yeah.
Now, in our film, Secret Ingredients, we talked to a chiropractor that treats a lot of infertile couples. And she found that when she does chiropractic, she does mindset, but she puts them on an organic diet and they get better. They have kids. And when I was I speak at a lot of medical conferences. And in this particular one, I brought a partner, Amy Hartman. She and I were doing a film. I said, if you have a story for us about GMOs and Roundup, we'd like to video. So she came to our room and with our camera, she said, yeah, I put infertile couples, some of whom have been through fertility clinics, some have diagnoses, some don't. And now they all have kids. 100%. It was like 70 something or 50 something at the time. Then when we started filming, it was 70 something. Then by the time we closed the film, it was 90 something. I called her
90 couples.
123 couples. 100. I said, how many who followed your protocol did not get pregnant? She said 0. 100% success rate. Now I can go through, we can turn this lecture into an entire description of why GMOs and Roundup are related to infertility. We won't. And like autism spectrum disorder, there's only 2.6% of the people that noticed an improvement. Well, out of 3,256 people, the number of people that have autism is low. And the number, and in my films, there's people like in the film Secret Ingredients, there's 2 families that switched to organic and their autistic sons are no longer on the spectrum. In my film Genetic Roulette, there's 3 families that went organic and their 3 sons got better, but they're still on the spectrum. And pediatrician Michelle Perro in the film Secret Ingredients says sometimes a diet alone will do it, and sometimes it's diet alone. And that autism in many cases is curable, but not always. It depends where they are in the spectrum. But the foundation is necessary to put them on a organic diet. And it's interesting. She treated one family with an autistic son and said, all of you should eat organic. You don't just make special food for him, all of you. So he doesn't feel separate. The daughter's ADHD went away. The mother lost weight and the father's kidney situation dramatically improved. She wasn't treating the whole family. All they did was switch to organic. So what we have here are many lists of diseases that are related to GMOs and Roundup. If you have one of the diseases, you out there in podcast land, if you have one of these diseases, there's no way to know for sure whether it's related to GMOs and Roundup, but the action is really simple. Switch to organic for a while and see what happens. Now, I remember talking to, I was speaking every year at an environmental medicine conference, and doctors were prescribing non-GMO diets as a result. Came back with a video camera, interviewed Dr. Emily Lindner, and she told me everyone gets better. And I went to her office and started interviewing people. And I sat down and said, okay, she said, put 5,000 people on non-GMO organic diets. I said, how quickly do things get better? Now, she was doing other things, but she said, anxiety, depression, that goes away right away. Asthma, allergies, maybe a week. Digestive disorders could take about 2 months, but then you have to rebuild maybe over 2 years. And I was interviewing some of these folks, and sure enough, it was a line. Now that, your mileage may vary, but because they were doing other things, and all right, so now she's going off of processed foods and whatnot. So is it really the food? Is it the GMOs and the Roundup? I went to farmers and said, okay, what did you notice when you put your pigs on? They were on GMOs, now they're on non-GMOs, or your cows. Now, they weren't switching to a gluten-free diet. The cows weren't dairy-free. It was just a switch from GMO to non-GMO, and it was the same symptoms getting better. Diarrhea going away in 2 days. In the animals. More energy, less disease, less infections, less viral diseases in a week, in 3 days, depending on the animal farm. So we're seeing this also among veterinarians and pets. The skyrocketing of pet cancers, especially dogs. They didn't even teach about dog cancer 30 years ago in veterinary school. Now, dogs are the number one mammal getting cancer. About 1.6, 1 out of 1.6 dogs will get cancer. And it skyrocketed with the introduction of GMOs and Roundup in their supply. I was talking to Dr. Michael Fox, who wrote the syndicated column Animal Doctor. He had 25 to 30 million readers. They introduced GMOs to the food supply for humans. The byproducts of that go into the animal feed and the pets. He got a raft of letters saying, now my dog or cat has itching and diarrhea, allergic reactions. He wrote back each of them individually, take them off of GMOs. Here how? He filled a file cabinet of pet owners saying, it worked. Thank you.
Well, and the other thing so there's two things also about pet food. Number one, so many people feeding, and I mean, they don't know any better, or they can't afford more. I mean, feeding their dogs kibble that's primarily grain, which they're not really supposed to be eating in the first place, which is GMO and sprayed and the whole 9 yards. And the other thing we talked about before we even started recording the podcast is when lawns and cities are spraying Roundup,
right,
on their grass, guess who's walking on the grass with their nose in the grass, sniffing the grass?
It gets absorbed through the paws. In fact, you can put a Tyvek suit out there, put glyphosate on it, and it drips through. It can go through your boots. I know someone who was spraying glyphosate around his greenhouse, and it turns out his urine killed weeds. It killed plants because it was absorbing probably into his boots, into his skin. And there's a additional POEA which is added to the Roundup to drive it into plants. It also drives it into human skin. In fact, it drives it in such great amounts, 10%. It's 3.3 times the amount of the level that is allowed by the Environmental Protection Agency. So we found out at one of these recent trials when someone testified, classic Monsanto science, when they took a human cadaver skin and put Roundup on it, it surpassed the allowable levels. So they didn't tell the EPA. They hid that. They fraudulently hid that from the EPA. Instead, they took new human cadaver skin and first baked it in an oven. And then it wasn't good enough. Then they froze it. Then they took this leather-like frozen human skin, put Roundup on it, and hardly any absorbed. That was the numbers turned into the EPA. So this is, I analyze Monsanto's corporate science and how they've covered up things. It's so blatant. That's one of my favorites because it's so visceral.
Right. So, okay. So you, okay. So we're getting, I mean, this is intense. Um, um, BT toxin. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit because BT toxin, I would imagine, was introduced as a strategy for organic farmers to have, and like, I mean, this is where it's interesting with language because if you go to a farmer's market, not all the farmers are necessarily organic. Some of them will say they're biodynamic, which
Well,
is a different. But
biodynamic includes everything that organic does and more.
okay,
So
but
it's another higher level. But let me talk
yeah,
about BT toxin here.
okay,
So there's a soil bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT for short. And if you take certain types of it and you gather the spores and the bacteria, you can put it in a spray and spray if you have an infestation of certain caterpillars. And the caterpillars will eat it, and it'll poke holes in the guts of the caterpillars, and it'll kill the caterpillars. Now, that particular BT toxin will degrade in the sunlight. It'll wash off in the rain. So by the time you eat, whether it's an organic farm or just a home farm, you can buy BT spray on a shelf. There's probably no BT toxin on the food that you eat. And if so, it's very small because, again, it degrades in the sun, it washes off in the rain. You can wash it off before you eat it. Now, this is an effective insecticide, and it kills the European corn borer, which decimates corn on a large scale. So the biotech companies like Monsanto took the bacterial gene that produces the BT toxin and put it into corn that's genetically engineered.
oh, they
So
didn't.
the corn itself produces the BT toxin. The corn is a registered insecticide. The BT toxin it produces is more toxic than the natural version. It's encapsulated so it doesn't wash off or biodegrade. And it's in a concentration that's thousands of times higher than the spray version. So that means that the European corn borer will eat the corn and die because it's contained inside the corn. But then we eat the corn and we eat a concentrated level of this BT toxin. When you take high levels of this BT toxin and put it in a laboratory with human cells, it pokes the holes in the human cells that it does inside these caterpillars, and it demonstrates that it's active in mammals, it's active in humans. We haven't seen in humans, they haven't sliced open a cadaver to see if it's poking holes inside, but they did find in a study in Canada that the BT toxin was in the blood of the humans. 93% of the pregnant women tested and 80% of the unborn fetuses. How did it get into the blood? Possibly through the holes that it created inside the cells.
Yeah.
And BT toxin is toxic to red blood cells and all these things. So, and there's a whole other story where if you eat the BT toxin corn, it might theoretically turn your intestinal flora into living pesticide factories, which we can go into if we want, but that's kind of scary. So what I'm talking about is you have three different identifiable toxins in GMOs: the GMO itself, the Roundup, and the BT toxin.
So the BT toxin corn, that would be sold as GMO corn, though, not
See,
organic corn. Because what you're talking about two different applications for BT toxin. We're talking about the organic farmer who's just spraying
right.
his crop with regular BT toxin. It kills the caterpillars, but it washes off, it degrades in the sunlight. It's actually A-okay. But now we're talking about a BT toxin genetically modified food that's incorporating the BT toxin in it. So that would be considered genetically modified.
Absolutely. It's genetically
Okay,
modified.
that's GMO corn.
And also, when you're handling the BT toxin, be careful because
Well,
it
I'm not
does.
having BT toxin,
I
to be
know.
clear.
When they
Yeah.
sprayed it by plane in the Pacific Northwest for gypsy moth infestation, 500 people reported allergic and flu-like symptoms. Some went to the hospital. Then I looked at doctors' reports of 23 farm workers in India handling BT cotton, and it was the same disorders and diseases. So
Right.
touching the plants, leaning against them, cleaning the cotton in cotton gin factories for the humans was causing the same problems as those who were sprayed by BT, allergic type, fever, asthma, all these things. So it's something that should never have been put into the food supply. The
Mhm.
advisors to the EPA said there's evidence that it will cause these things, and the EPA, which is lockstep with Monsanto and the biotech industry, said we're going to approve it and not require any serious testing.
Didn't Monsanto just get sold to DuPont?
Yes, no, to Bayer a few years ago.
Oh, Bayer.
It
That's it.
drove Bayer's stock price down, and
Mhm.
now they're still being clobbered by more and more very significant jury awards to plaintiffs who claim that Monsanto's glyphosate caused their cancer. The last award was $2.25 billion, and Bayer just dropped its dividend by 95%. They're getting sued by their shareholders. Their
Why did
chairman
they
of the
get
board
there?
resigned. It's it's
Shocking.
it's
Okay.
not shocking to me. I tried to warn them. I put out the
Well,
thing in
I
the
would
Facebook.
imagine.
Yeah,
It's just
don't do it.
shocking that you would do such a thing.
No,
Like,
it's
to
different.
me, anyway. So glyphosate as a chelator, that's the part where you were saying it prevents you from absorbing minerals
Yeah, so
that
the
you.
way that works is this. Glyphosate was not originally understood as an herbicide. It was originally patented as a chelator to descale industrial boilers and pipes. Chelation means it hugs minerals and doesn't let go. So it
Yeah.
was pulling the minerals that were on the scaling or the caked along the walls of these boilers and pipes, and it grabs them and it holds on to them. So what it means is that when we have glyphosate in our bodies, some of the minerals that we need, and minerals, by the way, are important. They're like cofactors in all
Mhm.
of these metabolic pathways. So
Yeah.
there's like all these things that happen if you do this and this and this and this. But the key to the ignition is having a certain mineral there. And if the mineral's not there, it's like having all these workers sitting around waiting for the foreman to show up.
Yeah.
So if you don't have these minerals available, and if glyphosate's hugging them, you may test having those minerals, but they're not available because they are being hugged and blocked, and all of these functions get disturbed. So the P450 cytochrome pathway, which creates these CYP enzymes for the detoxification of the liver, kaput. The
Mm.
NRF2, and maybe that's the reason why the NRF2 detoxification pathway in cells doesn't work as well. It's stopped down by 30 or 50%. All of these pathways become reduced. We can argue as to what's causing the infertility, what's causing the mitochondrial problems. It could be the lack of minerals.
Mhm.
Magnesium or manganese causes motility of sperm, and there's certain minerals that are needed for mitochondria. But there's other things. There's a lot of things that are competing for the reason. But that's
Sure.
an example of something that's obvious. There's some people that believe that can list all of these different diseases as diseases of mineral deficiency. And if you look at the animals in the United States, what are they fed if they're not organic? They're fed largely Roundup Ready crops. Now, the
Yeah.
Roundup Ready crops are deficient in minerals. You can compare them. It's like they're void of minerals in certain categories. Absolutely horrible. They also have excess residues of Roundup.
Mhm.
Now, the livestock eats mineral deficient
Yeah.
feed and the Roundup. So now the livestock end up mineral deficient. Now there's these epidemics of infertility and other problems in the livestock. Then the humans eat the mineral deficient animals, the mineral deficient plants, the excess glyphosate in both, and now we're mineral deficient, and any minerals we still have can, not any of them, but some of them become blocked or bound by this chelation. And some of them are devastating. So it's like if we can drill down and go into like which particular gut bacteria is damaged from Roundup. And if we look, I asked an expert at this, Kiran Krishnan, because he did this
Oh, we
study.
just had him on the podcast.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Kiran did research on glyphosate and Roundup put into a fake human gut called a Shine model.
Mhm.
It took a 3-year-old's fecal matter. This lived on organic food, never vaccinated, never had antibiotics, fed her poop into a human gut model fed it organic food for 3 weeks, added Roundup, saw what happened from the Roundup, and it was so significant, such changes. I went over those 28 different conditions with him and said, which of these could be caused by or exacerbated by just what you found? Every single one of them: digestion, fatigue, obesity, brain fog, depression, anxiety, food allergies, joint pain, gluten sensitivity, insomnia. And he went through and he described how it would work.
Yeah, it wiped out our microbiome. I remember him talking about this study at a talk I went to where he was speaking. It's a shocking.
Oh yeah, and that's just one thing. If we talk about the leaky gut, my friend Zach Bush puts glyphosate on a plate of human cells, and in video can watch them separate. And there's Alicia Fasano from Harvard wrote a study saying all disease starts with leaky gut. So there's a whole list that can come from leaky gut, a whole list that can come from mineral deficiency, a whole list of diseases from gut bacteria, a whole list of diseases from mitochondrial problems, and then there's hormones and neurotransmitters, and glyphosate does it all. So it's like when I did an interview with Stephanie Seneff, kind of made her famous at the time, I called it the Darth Vader chemical.
Yeah.
Because of it destroys the foundation of health. So if people are trying to biohack, if people are trying to live long, this is a no-brainer. An ancient Ayurvedic expression says, with the wrong food, the medicine won't work. With the right food, the medicine's not needed. So if you're plugging yourself into machines and doing all these things and doing the intermittent fasting and all this, but what you're eating has glyphosate and GMOs and Bt toxin, why bother? Why bother? It's not quite that bad because, yes, some people can't get organic food all the time. But I want to just, before we get into the thing that's even worse, because we're going to
give people a little breath here. Let's allow people's shoulder to come down. Let's give them a little hope, shall we?
All right. So here's the thing. Whether you're a human or a rat, and if you're a rat, I don't know how you get your headphones on, but if you're whether a human or a rat, we get better on an organic diet. They take a rat, feed them Roundup Ready soy for 8 months, damage to the testicles, to the pancreas, to the kidneys, put them on non-GMO soy, they start getting better.
So they heal.
They heal. Okay. I went to these doctors' offices and they switched to organic. Someone's Crohn's disease stopped in 3 days. Another person's IBD was fixed in 3 weeks. Another took 6 weeks. People's joint pain, autoimmune disease, big changes that they've been struggling with go away quickly. And if you're gluten sensitive, I put forward a thesis 12 years ago that the Roundup and GMOs predispose people to gluten sensitivity. And I called up a gluten guru, now my good friend Tom O'Brien. He said, everything you're telling me, if it's true from GMOs and Roundup, definitely does promote gluten sensitivity. And gluten sensitivity, according to the self-report, about 42% of the people I surveyed said they improved their gluten sensitivity when they switched to non-GMO and organic diets. But don't get off of gluten and go on to corn. that's GMO.
Or soy. Yeah.
Soy that's GMO, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's workable.
Okay, so now I had interviewed a woman who her company name is Biotic Quest.
Yeah.
I don't know if you come across her. You know her. She's really smart. She's phenomenal. Like, she's a woman who wasn't even in this field until her husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Martha Coughlin. Yeah. Is it Coughlin?
Martha, I talk with her regularly. We're working on some science together.
Because doesn't she have a strain of bacteria in her probiotic that helps to break down glyphosate in the gut?
Yes, in a way that breaks it down. And remember I mentioned Don Huber, that he gave a lecture and stuff. Don Huber and she created this patented organism that breaks down glyphosate. Yeah. And it's in her sugar shift at Biotic.
Yeah, in the sugar shift probiotic. And I remember, like, when she said, I have a lot of jaw-dropping moments on my podcast. Every once in a while, I'm like, get out. So, because I just want people to understand that, the first answer to the solution, the first step you can take is, at the very least, reduce, if you can't completely eliminate, but definitely cut it. I mean, the worst crops for glyphosate and for GMO is what Jeffrey's been talking about here. It's corn, it's soy, it's wheat, it's oats,
And
What else?
the legumes,
And the legumes, right? Because they're desiccating. They're spraying them to desiccate
beans,
them
mung beans,
before.
lentils.
So,
No
and those,
hummus anymore unless it's organic.
yeah, and so those buying those organic isn't generally, it's not wildly more expensive. I mean, it is more expensive, but at the very least, if you reduce those, then you're reducing your intake. But now what's interesting is, you've got this sugar shift probiotic bibiotic quest that can help to break down glyphosate in the gut. Because doesn't it embed? Like, I mean, it's not like you stop eating it and it's
Most
gone
of
over.
it, it's water soluble. Some of it embeds, but most of it
Well,
goes
washed
out
out.
later on.
Okay.
Yeah. I did a series called Healing from GMOs and Roundup,
Yeah.
where, Mercola and Dietrich Klinghardt and Josh Axe and Lee Cowden and Zach Bush and Kieran Krishna, all these people brought their wares and their understanding. So there's actually many ways to detox, rebuild, and repair from
What's that
exposure.
documentary called? Just so people
It's a
know.
summit called Healing from GMOs and Roundup.
Okay. Summit
Or
Healing
Healing
from.
from GMOs is the official title, but it's about healing from GMOs and Roundup. And what I recommend is if you go on our site, responsibletechnology.org, there's two communities. One's called self-care advocates. The other's called healthcare practitioners. It's $25 a month. It supports our work, and you get the best of our work from the Institute's 21 years. There's a course in GMO 1.0. There's a course in 2.0, which we're about to speak on. You get to watch the film I did with Amy Hart called Secret Ingredients, which is the #1 tool to convince people to go organic. In fact, if you are the person that's eating organic in your household and your spouse just doesn't want to talk about it anymore as he eats his McDonald's hamburger, don't try it. You've been discounted. Let me tell them. Let
Yeah.
me do the heavy lifting. Show the film. And
Yeah.
that's when they get, whoa, this is amazing. You think that's related to this? Let's try it. It really works as a conversion tool. Then there's a 90-day lifestyle upgrade for the self-care advocates. How to change, how to come out of it. The doctors get more of the healing from GMOs as well. They get the protocols that they can then give out to their patients. But now I'm going to give a reason why this is going to sound funny. Why I'm going to give a compelling reason why you really want to spend at least $25 a month at responsibletechnology.org. Why you want to run there now and contribute more if you can. Okay? So if we're just talking about GMOs 1.0, I traveled the world, spoke in 43 countries, trained 1,500 speakers. We organized over 10,000 activists, put out 5 films, 2 books. It's like at this point, if it was just GMO 1.0, my next trip could be my celebration tour, my victory lap, right? But they introduced GMO 2.0. Many people have heard of CRISPR, gene editing. And to give you an idea, it's so cheap to use CRISPR. They use it in high school classes. You can buy a kit for under $2,000 and do things in your own home that no one has ever been able to do in all of human history. Now you're creating GMOs. The process of genetic engineering causes massive collateral damage. The biotech industry pretends that gene editing is somehow different, that it's safe and predictable and not dangerous. If you go to our site and look at the film, 7 reasons why gene editing is dangerous and unpredictable. It's just 6 minutes. It's animated journey into the DNA. It's obvious. The journal Nature called it chromosomal mayhem. Chromosomal mayhem, the results of 3 studies with CRISPR. Shattering of the DNA, deletions, insertions, mutations, disaster. And yet, the biotech industry mounted a massive global disinformation campaign, convincing their friends in government, and they have a lot of friends in government, to look the other way, to deregulate it in the United States, Canada, the UK, Japan, India, Australia, Brazil, Argentina. Now there's a full court press in the EU to do the same. This is a disaster. I'm going to give the disaster in 3 levels.
So just before you go on to the 3 levels of disaster, is this the apples that don't get brown?
No.
This is not the apples that don't get brown. Okay.
The apples, you could use the technology to create apples that don't get brown.
Okay.
But in this case, it's mushrooms that don't get brown. They were approved for gene editing, and they approved it without any required tests. And that they knocked out a gene using CRISPR that creates the browning piece.
Of the mushroom.
But they found 3 years later that the process of knocking out only actually works 2/3 of the time and fails 1/3 of the time. And sometimes when it fails, it truncates the protein that's created. So you're not creating the full protein, but a partial protein, and those can be toxic, allergenic, or deadly.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
they didn't require any testing on the mushrooms. They said, it's not something that we have to oversee. The USDA said it's not our problem. The FDA only has a volunteer program. The EPA is like out to lunch on most things. And so there's no one guarding the store. And you can just, there's a company that was creating mustard greens that were gene edited. No one tested it. They were putting it out through food service.
Are they labeled?
No,
Oh,
no, because
okay.
the labeling for GMOs in the United States was basically written by Monsanto. So if you go through catering and restaurants, there's no labeling. And if it's gene edited, there's no labeling. Gene
Wow.
editing has a loophole. Now,
Okay, I interrupted you. 3 levels of disaster. People are probably want to punch me in the head right now. You interrupted him. He was about to give us the 3 levels of disaster. So
maybe we'll just think of something else and have videos. No, all right. So the
no,
first is to our food supply, because now we're saying anyone can create a GMO with a technology that is prone to side effects, but easily used and deregulated. So let's just do science fairs. Serve the brownies that are genetically engineered. Serve the new green kumquats. Serve the glowing bananas and call it safe. But other companies are like this one trying to create all these new traits and sell them to companies to put it out there with no testing. And there's no labeling in the United States. And there's no way to avoid it except if you eat organic or products that are verified as non-GMO by the Non-GMO Project. So that's the first level. It can flood our food supply. So shift to organic for another reason.
And look for that little non-GMO. I mean, I live by that non-GMO
And if
project.
you have a choice between Non-GMO Project verified and organic, I choose the organic because the Non-GMO Project verified doesn't test glyphosate levels, but glyphosate is not allowed in organic. The two together is the best because the Non-GMO Project actually tests for contamination of GMOs, if there's potential GMOs, where organic doesn't require testing. So the two together is the gold standard. But if you have to choose, like you can get a non-GMO verified bowl of oatmeal. Oats are never genetically engineered, but they're sprayed with Roundup.
So you want to go with the organic.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the first is the food supply. And that's a disaster. This is worse. Everything with DNA is being targeted. Let's create new insects, new mosquitoes. Let's create new grass, new trees, new pets. This generation could replace nature and end biological evolution as we know it because there's a gene rush going on. People are trying to get their new organisms out and get them commercialized before the patent runs out. So there's no one stopping it. And there's an indigenous wise person in the early 90s said, early this century, we're going to be facing the potential end of biological evolution as we know it. That's what I think he was talking about. So we need to rein it in and protect nature in this generation, or all future generations will be really pissed at us. The third is more dangerous. The most dangerous species to genetically engineer are the species that are mostly being used by these labs, microorganisms. All the high school students are doing bacteria. Others are doing viruses. There's all these different microbes, algae. These are the ones that we rely on.
Yeah.
You know, if you just put it in perspective, a well-functioning microbiome is our micro Jedi army.
Yeah.
That provides most of the oxygen on the planet through algae, health of forests through the mycorrhizal fungi networks that shuttle nutrients, the whole carbon cycle through soil microbes, and human health full stop. 80% of diseases find their source in imbalances of the gut microbiome. We've outsourced up to 90% of our chemical and metabolic functions to the microbes living inside us. We can get away with a measly 23,000 genes less than earthworms because we use the 3.5 million genes of the microbes living inside us. The reason why they're so effective at supporting ecosystems and hosts and being supported by them is because they go through massive gene flow, swap meets, where they exchange genes and say, try this, see if it helps. Try this, see if it helps. I'll take that. And they pass their genes on to each other and form this intricate coevolution in all these different ecosystems. Now you take a high school student that genetically engineered a gene into bacteria that's never co-evolved. He releases it or she releases it. It travels, it mutates, it replicates, survives, assuming it survives. Many will not, most may not, but some will. Now it transfers its genes to other types of microbes. They travel, mutate, transfer their genes to other microbes. Now we have affected the whole planet. 10,000 ecosystems, 10,000 different types of organisms or more. There's a trillion of them. And we could damage the microbiome, which can cause disease or collapse ecosystems. And yet, there is essentially no one looking after this issue. There's meager, almost non-existent regulations on a small set of the microbes, none in academia, none in the high schools, none that you would do at home. There's 2 companies alone that are now spreading genetically engineered bacteria on up to 43 million farm acres in the United States. I asked Kiran Krishnan, can you give me an example of how a well-meaning company can put something in the soil that might affect human health? He was instant in his response. He said, when you release something in the soil, there's competition. You want to make sure yours survives, so you outfit it with 2 things: antimicrobials to kill other microbes, and antibiotic resistance so it survives things like Roundup. Now, what happens if those combinations get consumed? Someone touches soil, puts their mouth, and some beneficial, some pathogenic bacteria or neutral bacteria incorporates that antimicrobial and antibiotic resistance. And now it lives long and prospers inside us. It starts wiping out others. It grows. It's unkillable. And now we have dysbiosis, which is the basis, as I said, or linked to up to 80% of human diseases.
Yeah. Well, it's, and to simplify this for the audience, I mean, it's pretty scary. To simplify it for the audience, it's a little bit like, didn't Australia introduce rabbits to solve a problem at some point?
I love this.
But
I use this all the time.
But it's a perfect analogy, right? Because you bring an organism, you bring this cute little fuzzy animal, like everybody, like they are so cute, right? They got the ears and the little tail and they're super cute and they hippity hop. They have no natural predators. And the next thing you know, and we see this all over the place, like it's happening in lakes with that carp, carp
so
growing out of control.
I mean, I think your point about rabbits is perfect. It was 1859, and someone introduced 24 rabbits into the countryside so that visitors from England would feel more at home so they could hunt rabbits.
Yeah. They weren't even solving
by the 1920s, over 10 billion rabbits, because rabbits multiply like rabbits. Right? So that's a perfect example, because we see the folly of introducing a single species that's new into an ecosystem. With gene editing or genetic engineering, and they're introducing new species. They call them the same thing. Oh, it's just this particular type of bacterium. In the film, Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle, again, on responsibletechnology.org. I'm not going to do a plot spoiler for you. We've talked long enough. You're going to find a genetically engineered bacteria that was modified by well-meaning scientists to solve some problems, which, had it been released as planned, could have theoretically ended terrestrial plant life. Another one, which, had it been released as planned, could have altered weather patterns. I'll leave you to that 16-minute film, Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle, and it's on responsibletechnology.org. On the homepage, scroll down. So you got two films assigned: the 6-minute 7 Reasons Why Gene Editing is Dangerous and Unpredictable, the 16-minute film, Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle. Then you can pay to rent or own Secret Ingredients at secretingredientsfilm.com, or join the self-care advocacy or healthcare practitioner. And here's why you really want to put your money into that, because our Institute for Responsible Technology, we built the movement to educate people about the health dangers of GMOs. And we started, no one wanted to talk about the health dangers. For some reason, no NGO or nonprofit wanted to go that route. I'm thinking, this is the Achilles heel. And we now have about half the world's population understanding that GMO foods are not safe. Massive victory. That has kept the number of classic GMOs down to about a dozen. Now we have to stop a bigger piece. We're spearheading the efforts to stop the release of genetically engineered microbes, but we're out of money. I mean, literally out of money. Laid off most of the staff, laid me off, and I'm just working. I'm moonlighting here. I'm moonlighting,
Yeah.
Natalie.
Wow.
No, I got a few hours I can work. And we're looking ideally for the big bucks, 10 million, 25 million a year, to build a movement of movements among healthcare practitioners, regenerative agriculture, environmentalists, ocean preservationists, the carbon drawdown people for the climate change. All of us, all of these movements need a healthy microbiome for success. They just don't know it, some of them. And so we
Yeah.
know we want to inoculate popular culture, create science, peer-reviewed articles, films, docuseries. We know the formula. It's expensive, way more expensive than consumer education, which we're doing for years. So right now, we just want to keep the lights on so I can continue to do podcasts and interviews and white papers and peer-reviewed articles, and then find a foundation or a philanthropist or billionaire to go, oh, this is actually more serious than any other existential threat. At any time, one of these could be released and be a cataclysm. We need to stop this with national laws and international treaties. And to do that, you need popular culture and movements. And this is exactly what we have. Popular culture movements and compelling messaging in our plan. So the people listening are probably not the billionaires. They probably don't have a foundation where they can give us millions of dollars. If you do, give me a call.
You never know.
But can make a donation, a recurring donation of $25 a month, and keep us in business so that we can put this out and magnetize that support. And it doesn't have to be us. Someone else wants to take it. Fine. Here's all our plans. Here's all of our materials.
Yeah.
We'll give it to you. It's not, we have to have our name on Save the Planet. It's not my resume builder, Save the Planet 2026. We've already saved the health of billions of people by containing the growth of GMOs. We don't need kudos for this, but we do need a planet for our future.
Yeah. So this is the 2.0 is stop this genetic modification of bacteria and microorganisms that ultimately we can't control.
So eat organic, donate to the Institute for Responsible Technology. Better yet, get something for your donation and get deeper into the knowledge because of the self-care advocacy program and the healthcare practitioner program. And you'll actually join a community of like-minded people for discussions. And we have a special newsletter for you for those groups.
I love it.
Yeah, we have more staff. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no. And there are products that help, right? You've got Sugar Shift by Biotic Quest that is helpful. I think Zach Bush's product Ion now also.
Over here. I interviewed him. Kieran Krishnan's one. And so I keep people up to date on the email list that you'll join. I will do a webinar with each person. And I'm waiting for Martha to do some research on amount of glyphosate in the urine so I can bring the research. I like to have the product, the theory, and either the research in humans or the clinical trial, the clinical effects, so that I can give the whole package.
Perfect.
And then I bring all that because the number 2 question that I've been asked over 28 years is, in addition to avoiding GMOs and Roundup, what else can I do?
Yeah. What do I do about it?
It's above my pay grade, but then I realized some of these experts actually have data for us all. Okay,
cool. That's amazing. And actually, have you ever met Carolyn Allen from Beam Minerals?
Beam, yeah.
Because they have the there it is.
Beam. And
he's got it all, guys. It's the fulvic and the humic acid. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm going to do a webinar with her shortly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you will enjoy chatting with her.
I talked to her, gave a long talk, saw her at A4M conference, and I'm going to talk to her next week.
Yeah, she's the one that taught me about the shikimate pathway, actually. So I moderated a panel that she was speaking on, and
what I love? Sometimes I find it's like I sit at the top of a lineage, and I don't even know it. It's like I got Michelle Perro involved, and she's got a book. I inspired Zen Honeycutt, and she's got a movement. I inspired Robin O'Brien, and she's got a book. And it's like I was sitting with Emily Lindner in her office. She said she had put 5,000 people on a non-GMO diet, and all of them get better. And I was interviewing the patients and another practice. And after everything, we turned off the camera. I said, "So how'd you learn about GMOs?" She goes, "From you."
Mm-hmm.
It was a touching moment. I was
Well,
deeply.
thank you. Yeah. No, listen, I mean, you've been a tireless advocate for this stuff for a very, very long time. So, and you don't look like you've been around long enough to been advocating for all this. So clearly that clean lifestyle is paying off for you. So, Jeffrey, I think you've given it, but let's wrap it up with those websites,
Okay.
right? So it's responsibletechnology.org.
Right.
There's which is where you'll find the self-care advocates group,
Yeah.
and the healthcare
practitioner
group.
Yeah, there's other websites, but let's just give that one. I mean, you can go there from pets and GMOs. You can go from there to, there's all sorts of, that's the mothership.
And then your personal, and you have a website yourself, right? Or is that the website to learn more about Jeffrey?
There, I'm developing. You'll have me on again when I come up with my Jeffrey Smith 2.0. When I have, I can't talk about that yet.
Okay, we're not talking about Jeffrey Smith 2.0 just yet. But anyway, we'll put all this in the resources in the show notes. Jeffrey, thank you for your work. Thank you for everything that you do. And we should all walk away from this inspired, charged up, and more aware of how to stay healthy and reclaim our health.
Absolutely. And
thank you so
I
much.
love when you said, happy when I taught people to speak about GMOs, I said, you got to be optimistic and upbeat. Because if you eat a GMO, I say, don't worry about it, because worrying is toxic. So now you have two toxins. It's like, we're going to get exposed. Don't worry about it. You've been exposed for decades. So what? We all have. Just be happy, enjoy, be optimistic, and that'll improve the immune system and the ability to detox, and things will move forward much better. Thank you so much, Natalie.